Mark chapter 14. It was now 2 days before the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the chief priests and the scribes were seeking how to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him. For they said, "Not during the feast, lest there be an uproar among the people." And while he was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, and he was reclining at table, a woman came with an alabaster flask of ointment, of pure nard, very costly. And she broke the flask and poured it over his head. And there were some who said to themselves indignantly, "Why was the ointment wasted like that? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor." And they scolded her. But Jesus said, "Leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them. But you will not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for burial. And truly I say to you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her." Then Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12, went to the chief priests in order to betray him to them. And when they heard it, they were glad and promised to give him money. And he sought an opportunity to betray him. You may be seated.
That as we come out of this pandemic, we're starting up different things at different times. We have already begun our Bible classes. Right now, Mark is doing a study on church involvement. And judging by the number of people we had in class this morning, the 44% of members of Churches of Christ who are actively involved in Bible class, worship, and small groups is much lower in this congregation. And I'm not doing that to rag on anybody, except Jim. We need to be in Bible class, folks. Our children need to be in Bible class. Now then, we have one class that does not have a teacher. So we're looking for a cradle roll teacher. If you would like to teach cradle roll, if you have experience in that, or if you'd like to learn how to teach cradle roll, because we got a whole bunch of new babies in this congregation and we're about to have more. So please, somebody step up and say, "I'm going to teach those little bitty babies about Jesus." I bet Mary's already singing to her baby about Jesus. They're never too young. We need a teacher. Somebody, please, step up and teach our babies about Jesus. And be in Bible class. That's a big deal. Our elders don't ask a whole lot of us. An hour in Bible class, an hour in church, and an hour with your small groups. That's not a lot. Certainly we can give 3 hours to God every week. Can't we? 168 hours in a week. 3 of them to God. We can do that as the church family comes together. Well, I don't know about your spending habits. I know quite a bit about mine. I thought I was tight-fisted until I met my wife. I'm a pretty free spender sometimes. I don't like to sacrifice quality, but I will always shop around for the lowest price. And I donate some to different charities, but I only give to the charities that I've kind of investigated, and I know that they're going to use that money, 100% of it, for what they say they're all about. I'm not going to give to a charity who throws a big banquet for all the officers in the charity every year at some fancy hotel with high-dollar food. But as I mentioned, Deborah is as tight as they come. I'll tell you, she is a real saver. She will put it away for a rainy day, and her motto is, if you don't need it, then don't buy it. So we're not extravagant people, except on very rare occasions when maybe somebody's celebrating an anniversary or having a special birthday. Most of the time, though, we keep it pretty simple, and we keep it quite inexpensive. You will see us often driving through Taco Bell for a bean burrito. You know, that's $1.39. I remember when they were a dime. Some of y'all do too. Let me give you the Webster definition of extravagance. Spending much more than is necessary or wise. Wasteful, excessively high, exceeding the bounds of reason, going beyond what is deserved or justifiable. So I have to tell you, as an admittedly tight-fisted person, I tend to side with the apostles in the text that Josh just read for us. That jar of perfume costs a lot of money, a whole year's wages. Now think about that. Think about, in your mind, the number you wrote on your 1040 this year, your annual income, and you have a jar of perfume that is worth that much money. You're going to use that perfume just a little dab at a time, right? If you use it at all. Now, us guys, when we were young and dating you beautiful ladies in the congregation, we used to go down to the convenience store and pick up one of those green bottles of Brute, or I'm old enough to remember High Karate. And we would splash that stuff on like crazy, and we were pretty sure that when we picked up our date, we were smelling like Don Juan. Now, you ladies, you're pretty liberal with your perfumes, aren't you? You spritz a little bit everywhere. You'll put a little dab behind your ears, and you'll put some on your wrists and rub it together. You're pretty liberal with your smell good stuff. But again, imagine a bottle of perfume or a jar that's worth what you make in an entire year, and then using that bottle all at once. And once it's gone, except for the smell, and it'll be gone soon enough, right? That is exactly what happens in the text that Josh read for us. Expensive perfume is opened and applied to the head of Jesus, and then it's gone. And how did the disciples react in the text? Were they shocked by this? Were they disappointed by this? Were they confused at what was going on? No, Mark says they were angry about it. Look again at verse 4. There were some who said to themselves indignantly, why was this ointment wasted like that? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor, and then they scolded her. Well, let's think that through. Why are they angry? Why are they so harsh with her? I mean, they haven't lost anything, have they? Why do they even care? It's not their perfume. They're not offended by this because it doesn't even involve them. Now, if you think about the passage as a whole, it's just full of angry people, isn't it? It starts with the religious leaders of Israel. They're so angry, they're ready to kill Jesus. And then you have the disciples who are indignant. Why this waste of perfume? And then at the very end of the passage, we have Judas Iscariot, who is so put off by Jesus that he leaves completely to seek out a way to betray the one he's been following. Now, we've seen the anger of the religious leaders all through the Gospel of Mark, haven't we? They're angry because of the way Jesus is doing things. If he keeps going the way he's going to destroy their entire system, their whole way of life. Their whole concept of what it means to serve God is going to be taken apart by Jesus. Judas maybe is angry because, well, Jesus is just not doing what Judas thinks Jesus ought to do. Judas was pretty sure when he started following Jesus that he was going to muster an army and march on Rome. He sees now that that's not going to happen. Judas has given up on Jesus, and he's angry. But what about the other 11 disciples? What are they angry about? When that jar of perfume was cracked open and poured out on Jesus' head, why did they become indignant? Why did they see this as an extravagant, unnecessary waste? What a waste. They don't even bother to think that the perfume doesn't even belong to them. They only see two options with this jar of perfume. First, you either waste it by pouring it out on something, or you sell it and give the money to the poor. They miss the most obvious option of all, that this woman could have used it for herself. That seems to me to be the most obvious use of the perfume. After all, it's her perfume. But that's lost on the other 11 apostles. If the perfume's going to be used, surely there's a better use for it than this extravagant waste that they've just witnessed. But again, why does that waste make them so angry? You know what? The things that make us angry say a lot about us. I think if we would stop most of the time and ask ourselves why we're angry about something, it would tell us a lot about what's in our hearts. And I'll illustrate that point by talking about the different times throughout this book that Jesus himself got angry. You remember the disciples were keeping the little children away from Jesus. Jesus is too busy to be visiting with a bunch of little kids. Stop bothering him. And when Jesus saw what they were doing, he became indignant with them. He's angry at the disciples because ministering to children is an important work for Jesus. In Mark chapter 3, you remember the man with the withered hand wants Jesus to heal him, but it is the Sabbath day. And so the Jewish leaders say, "You don't heal on the Sabbath." And Jesus looks at them in anger. And he says, "Your hearts are hard." Just a few weeks ago, we saw Jesus get angry in the temple, drove out the money changers, turned over the tables. God wanted his house to be a house of prayer and worship, a place where people come to be blessed. And they had turned it into a den of robbers with the blessing of the religious leaders. And that made Jesus very angry. So let's step back and ask ourselves a question. What does the anger of Jesus say about him? Well, his anger usually has to do with other people being hurt, people being taken advantage of, people being cast aside as unimportant. That's what makes Jesus angry. And in fact, if we'll look at the anger of Jesus, we'll discover that the root of it is found in what he said are the two greatest commandments. Love God with all you have and love others as much as you love yourself. Jesus is angry about what sin has done to his creation. He's angry about attitudes that shut people out of the kingdom because they're perceived to be insignificant or unworthy or unimportant. He's angry with those who would abuse or take advantage of other people. That's what makes Jesus angry. Now, what about the disciples? Why are they angry? And we might argue that they're just angry about this wasteful extravagance because they really do have a heart for the poor. Jesus, nowhere in the text, questions their compassion for poor people. And for all we know, they really do love the poor. They really would like to sell that jar and give all the money to the poor. But Jesus says, guys, you're going to have the poor with you always, but not me. I'm not going to be with you always. Maybe something else is at play here. Look again at verse 5, still up on the screen, I believe. For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor, and they scolded her. They're not just angry, they actually said something to the woman in a scolding way. They let their anger go from here to here, and it came out. What has their anger done to them? What kind of people has it made them? In this instance, I think we could use the words hateful and judgmental and arrogant. Why has that happened? I don't know. Maybe they thought her generosity was making them look bad. After all, they're the ones who've been in competition with each other, right? About who's going to be on either side of Jesus when he comes into his kingdom. They're the ones who are arguing about who is the greatest in the kingdom. So I really don't know what's at play here, but I will tell you what I think for what it's worth, and it's simply my opinion. I think it's selfishness. I think they've been following Jesus long enough that they have somehow, as a group, been elevated to almost Christ-like status. They've left everything to follow Jesus, and because they've done this, they think they've earned the right to somehow boss other people around. That they have the right to tell people what they should and shouldn't do. That they have the right to shame people into what they, the disciples, think they should be doing or not be doing. And I love what Jesus does here. He jumps to her defense in a heartbeat, doesn't he? She hadn't done anything wrong. How dare they accuse her? How dare they judge her? She hadn't done anything wrong. You've heard it said from this pulpit many times and probably seen it in a dozen articles. Anger is just one letter away from danger. Anger can be a dangerous emotion. It can cause you to judge people unfairly. It can cause you to mistreat innocent people. And so when we get angry, we need to ask ourselves a question. What is it exactly that I'm angry about? Because it may have nothing to do with the person who's standing in front of me who I'm about to unload on. If we could just take a step back and ask ourselves, what is it that I'm really angry about? It might keep us from doing or saying something that later on we're going to regret in a big way. I'm convinced that the 12 are really regretting this moment for the rest of their lives. The day they dressed down the woman because she anointed Jesus before his burial. Jesus doesn't rebuke her at all for being wasteful. He doesn't shame her at all for being extravagant. All he does is silence the attackers, and then he commends her for her gift. Look again at verse 9. And truly, I say to you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her. And sure enough, here we are this morning, 2,000 years after the event, talking about what she's done. Have you ever been so captivated by the love of God that you wanted to express yourself in some extravagant way? That somehow the love of God has so blossomed in your heart that you wanted your gratitude to come out in some not normal way, but some extraordinary way. And maybe it was something you wanted to do that was physical. Maybe you dropped to your knees before the throne of God and prayed to him and thanked him for what he's done. Maybe you've laid yourself out prostrate, flat on the ground with your face in the dirt to give thanks to the King of Kings. Maybe you just wanted to lift your hands up. Say, Lord, thank you for all that you've done. Or maybe this love for God welled up within your heart made you want to do something more tangible than that, like committing to a mission or a particular ministry. And I'm not talking about writing a check to some cause. I'm talking about actually throwing yourself into that ministry and getting your hands dirty. Truly sacrificing yourself. And it might be something monetary, but not just normal giving, but something outside of yourself. You gave extravagantly, maybe to the point that you had to change your lifestyle for a little while to make up the difference. Have you ever felt these things within you as you ponder the love of God and as you become fully conscious of everything that he has done for you? And sometimes these things well up within us and we find ourselves having to kind of push them down because we know other people might be watching and we're afraid what they'll think. I mean, if I were to step aside and kneel right here in front of you, or if I were to lay down, just completely lay down with my face to the floor, or if I were to stand here this morning and raise my hands and my eyes toward heaven and offer a prayer, what would you think of me? See, in my mind, what you would be thinking is, show off. He's just doing that to be seen. He shouldn't show that kind of emotion in church. You know what? The woman in the story didn't care what anybody thought. She is thinking of nobody in the room except the one who gave his life for her. She's only thinking about Jesus. Really, the way she's going about this, she's acting as if there is nobody else even in the room. It's just her and Jesus. That's how focused she is. Now, Charles has already taken us into John's gospel this morning. John tells us who this woman is, doesn't he? This is Mary. And there's a lot of Marys in the New Testament, so we kind of have to narrow things down. It's not Mary, the mother of Jesus. It's not Mary Magdalene. It's Mary, the brother of Lazarus, whom Jesus has, as Charles has pointed out, raised from the dead. She has good reason to be grateful to Jesus. And in no way is she doing this so that she will be remembered in the year 2021. She is not doing this so that everybody else in the room can see her do it. No, she does this because she loves Jesus. It's Jesus who blesses the story by saying that what she has done will be retold generation after generation after generation. If we use our minds a little bit, we can almost picture this woman pondering before Jesus ever showed up. What is the one thing I could do for Jesus that will let him know how much I love him? What's the one thing I could do? And then it hits her. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the most precious thing I have, and I'm going to give all of it to Jesus. And that's exactly what she does. And little did she know at the time, but her act of kindness to Jesus will be the last kind thing that happens to him before he gets to the cross. While the disciples are stomping around in their righteous indignation, trying to convince each other how wasteful this woman is, trying to shame her and make her feel guilty that she didn't do something more practical, Jesus is touched. Jesus is touched that she brought the best that she had, and she gave it without restraint, without any regret for the future. Church, this is what it means to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. This is what it means to give your all to Jesus, fulfilling the greatest command. So let me ask you a question. What would it look like for you to come to Jesus, not to receive anything in return, not because you're going to get some benefit in any way, not to be noticed in any way, but to just come to Jesus simply and only for the purpose of expressing extravagant praise and gratitude? What would that look like? Maybe it would be committing yourself to a difficult ministry like making 150 sandwiches for homeless people and then actually going down and serving those people. Maybe it would mean giving up your Monday nights to mail out World Bible School lessons to people who don't know Jesus in a country halfway around the world. Maybe it would be you writing a sizable check to a missionary like Daniel Napier, who teaches Jesus to Muslim refugees in Thessalonica, Greece. or Keith Gaffner in Kenya. Maybe it's something as simple as you committing yourself to be in every Bible class, every worship service, and every meeting of your small group for the rest of the year. See, I'm convinced that our time may be the most precious thing we have. Are we willing to give Jesus his share? Are we willing to give Jesus all? What would it look like for you to give your love, to give honor, to give respect, to give extravagant praise to the one who saved you by giving his life? King of kings, Lord of lords. What would it look like? Whatever it is, do it. I hate to plagiarize Nike. Just do it. Because when you act on that impulse, Jesus will be honored. And it won't be about you. He will be the one glorified. Just do it. If you're here this morning and you're not a Christian, a great way for you to honor Jesus would be for you to claim him as your Savior and to confess that to us this morning and to be washed in the waters of baptism where his blood will cleanse you of all sin. If you're not in Jesus today, may today be the day of your salvation. If you need prayer from the entire congregation in a corporate way, if you'll come, we will pray for you. If you'd rather pray privately, again, as always, grab an elder, grab me, grab a member, and we'll find a place where we can go and pray privately about whatever's going on in your life. We want to help you. We want to serve you. It's part of who we are. Won't you come while we stand and sing?